Hello, everyone, and welcome to my discussion today. I'm going to be reading to you about the labyrinth that Thoth calls the Ra'um. This information was originally given to me on April 19th of 1988. I was shown an obsidian etheric crystal set in the center of a newly anchored energetic labyrinth called the Ra'um. And I stated in my article on it in the source issue of 1998, not only will the crystal be centered, but by that act, so will the entire labyrinth or sacred maze be activated to the level of Ra'um, the sacred fire. Now, let me do a little explaining first before we continue. When I wrote this material back in the 1980s, I really didn't have a bigger picture of, well, maybe I did have the bigger picture of it, but it didn't occur to me to explain it. It was sort of semi-subconscious. It was there, but I didn't put it into intellectual terms. Let's put it that way. And so I now bring it forward, and I see it and I feel it in those terms, something that can be spoken. And I also flesh in a little more understanding of it as well. So this labyrinth that I'm writing about here in this past issue of the source, it was created by the Order of the Burning Bush, which is an aspect of the Enochian Masters. Now, the Enochian Masters is a large topic, but Thoth is an Enochian Master. He's a lot of things. He's just so many things. But one of them is an Enochian Master. And these are terms that he has given me through the years to attempt to put a handle on certain energetic aspects of his soul, how it relates to the greater gathering of souls that are of this high caliber illuminary function. The same thing with these orders, Order of the Burning Bush, and all of this. These are collective energetic formats that souls, these souls that we're speaking of here, command. They create, they work through, and interact with one another in that working, in these orders. So this maze called the Ra'um that was created by the Order of the Burning Bush, actually it is a universal spectrum. It is a universal function within this spectrum, the Ra'um. But they created an overlay of it. They brought that universal law spectrum format, whatever, and they placed it as an overlay for the planet Earth to be able to connect to it more directly with greater functionality and on a very subliminal level where it became part of the tool set that we have in the Earth. Now, it's already a greater dynamic, right? But we're very limited in how we can interact with those dynamics as a whole because we have set ourselves into a box. We have placed ourselves into a consensual reality system that does not allow for us, in many ways or in any depth, to reach into these formats. So the ultra beings, the illuminaries, the angelics, and ad infinitum, they come together and create at certain times these overlays that contain that universal law and format, but in a digestible manner. It's like, okay, we're going to bring it. It's like there's a whole ocean, but we have trouble getting into that ocean and figuring out what's in there. So they create a drop out of the ocean. And that drop is a holographic fractal of the entire ocean. But it's also, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say it's a holographic reflection of a particular unit, of a particular format within the greater sea. So the drop in this instance, the Ra'um, is in that universal sea, but they brought it out, placed it as a reflection of the greater into the drop, and then they've taken the drop and they've basically spoon-fed it into the earth continuum, so we can access it more easily. Now, there's probably only a handful of people in the entire world that have ever read my material or even know about the Ra'um, especially back in 1988. So it's not like everybody has to figure this out. They have to say, oh, we've got to read Mai's material and then we'll be connected to this drop. No, of course not. I'm giving you this understanding in this format. But regardless of if I've ever written about it or not, it is there, and it is a drop, and it doesn't have to be called these names, and it doesn't have to be, given this particular definition in words and all these very, specialized names. It's simply a universal quantum fact, and it has been overlaid into this drop so that humanity can access it in deep dream state, in visionary quests, in just being extremely intuitive and feeling the energy of it, without having to define it, without having to understand it. However, it does help to understand it. And I'm giving you here some information on this from my perspective of the source translation that I do with the Thoth-Akasha. So that's how this is working here. So I'm going to continue. Now this is the basic description of the Ra'um. The Ra'um is the signal charge, the spark of electrostatic creation within the center of the molecule. This charge is activated at various levels through interaction with universal codes of the divine archetype. The purpose of this activation is to realign an elemental factor, i.e. molecule or grouping of molecules, to the sacred or divine fire of perfection, that center of all consciousness in which the mind of what we identify as God exists. Because this realignment can be stirred on various levels, this directive does not necessarily ordain instant Godhead to that molecule or collective molecule, such as in a human entity. The Ra'um is more likely to be activated at a much lower level, which would bring about a motion or acceleration of redirection toward the nearest degree of purity. This causes a free flow effect as the Ra'um graduates its elemental host toward a consciousness change at the molecular level, disengaging this consciousness from its previous modality and redirecting it toward a free assemblage with omni-thought, which encompasses all possible realities. Now that's pretty powerful, that last line, which encompasses all possible realities. In simple language, this means that when Ra'um occurs at a very basic level within a human vehicle, that vehicle experiences a cutting loose of its established temporal pathways and is able to move through time realities until the nearest pure form or path of most harmonic divine order is accessed. This can occur in a dramatic way, such as is witnessed by firewalking or non-bleeding yogas impaled on nails or in the transfiguration of Christ. But it can also exist in more subtle modes where the individual finds a sudden breakthrough in events as if the seas parted and the doors suddenly were opened to him or her, and He is no longer in the trenches, but above the conglomeration, free to choose his or her modality. One would perceive this as spirit affecting matter, by spirit acting on matter, molding it to more divine and ordered purpose. I will be turning a page here. Apologies. Well, actually, I should have stayed on this page, so I'm going back. This is only partly correct. Spirit does affect matter, but not by interfering with it. Instead, the charge of spirit coming through matter cuts the cord of dependence on matter and allows the initiate to dissolve time as a directional outcome, instead moving through time to choose the most ordered reality, ordered from the standpoint of the individual's divine destiny. And that is a mouthful, if I do say so. So we're going to go back and look at it again. Instead, the charge of spirit coming through matter cuts the cord of dependence on matter and allows the initiate to dissolve time as a directional outcome, instead moving through time to choose the most ordered reality, ordered from the standpoint of the individual's divine destiny. Now let's look at that. Now, when we think of the laws of cause and effect, and as we're moving through our day, time, tick, tick, tick of the clock, we don't know what our outcomes are going to be. Well, unless we're, extremely psychic, but even then, that's still a throw of the dice. It's just maybe a little more perceptual throw. But let's say we don't know really, what the outcome is going to be, an outcome of any moment, anything that we do. What is the outcome going to be? However, that's because we are allowing our spirit to simply go through the linear perception of time. Now, if we raise ourselves out of that perspective and instead look at it, and remember, in quantum physics, when you observe something, it changes it. Now hold that thought. So if you move yourself outside of the box of moment by moment, I'm going to take this step. Where will it lead? Well, maybe it'll lead here. Maybe it'll lead there. Or maybe I don't know. And I'm not even thinking about it, but I'm taking a step. Well, that action, that thought sequencing that goes lockstep with the actions we take leads us to whatever those actions are going to just simply the roll of the dice bring up for us. There are a lot of complications with it all, a lot of complexities, but nevertheless, boom, 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 boom. It just flows right through. However, if we move ourselves out of that perspective and instead we watch the charge of spirit coming through matter instead of in graduation, one step at a time, but just as a beam, an uninterrupted beam, a charge moving through our day, through our lives, outside of time, but it's a movement, a motion of energy. This cuts the cord of dependence on matter, depending on you putting one shoe on and then putting the next shoe on and taking some steps and opening the door and moving out the door. This is dependence. It's saying, I've got to do this before this happens, and then if I do that, then maybe this is going to happen. But I have to follow this procedure. Now, this is not telling you that you just have to go ad hoc through life, not at all. There is a law and there is an order to things in the physical matter world. But what is commanding the direction of that order? What is commanding the results of that order? We tend to think that everything has to follow a particular equation. And that is the equation. We figured it out. We've got it down. Einstein said so. All the other scientists said so. Stephen Hawking has said so. So it's true. But look at this. What was the exact equations before Einstein? How did he break through the box and give us a whole new set of crayons? And then Stephen Hawking, and a whole other array of crayons. So everything is, discovery and opening up one door after another. But what if we didn't have to do that? What if we didn't have to go along until somebody else opened the door and then we moved through that door? And then eons later, or years and years and years later, somebody else opens the door. Oh, okay. And we go through that door. What if we just took ourselves out of all of those little boxes and relating from doors to doors to doors, and we just went as one stream of energy? We're still abiding by the laws of the universe, but the laws of the universe are multidimensional, much, much vaster than what we've figured out so far on this little planet. So if we take ourselves out of the box and we move through those doors through a new perception, saying to ourselves, I'm no longer dependent on matter to lead me to my destiny, my divine destiny. Divine destiny is not destiny like, oh, nothing else can happen but this. You're going to slip on a banana peel. You can't change it at all. That's not what it means. From the Thothic perspective, divine destiny, the greater destiny with a capital D, that is the summit of the mountain for you in this lifetime, the next lifetime, whatever, wherever the summit, wherever takes you to the summit. And the summit can be defined in various ways, but it's still the summit. And you can get there by circling the mountain 10 times, bowing down 6 or 7 times, doing a little happy dance, then maybe crossing your fingers in your eyes. And then finally, you take your first step, and then you go to the next step, and then you go around the back, and then you come forward and then backward again, and then you take the next step. That's the way life is for us right now. I mean, that's kind of how we live. We finally get to the summit. But what if we didn't do that? What if we just went whoosh? We took the elevator. We just went to the summit. And everything that we passed through was still a part of our reality and a part of universal law, but it was dimensionalized. It was adjusted to the frequency of our individual divine destiny. So again, instead, the charge of spirit coming through matter cuts the cord of dependence on matter and allows the initiate to dissolve time as a directional outcome. Once we get outside the box of time, I mean, we still have to live in it. We have to pick our kids up from school. We have to do this and that. But that's not what I'm talking about. You can operate within the dictates of time for practical purposes, but exist in your greater self outside the box of time. You can allow that it exists, you can interact with it, but you're not a prisoner of it. And that's what this means. It allows the initiate to dissolve time as a directional outcome. Instead, moving through time to choose the most ordered reality, ordered from the standpoint of the individual's divine destiny. Okay, I think we've beaten that horse to death enough. I'll move on. But, I mean, we could write a book on that right there. Just that right there. And as usual, I haven't read this stuff, since 1980. So I'm getting off on it along with all of you. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And now I'm seeing it, from a more developed spectrum, a more conscious spectrum. So the next, it says, the Raun Labyrinth is a tool for this principle of spirit acting through matter. There is much more to the whole of it than is explained here, but this labyrinth is the touchstone for many levels of planetary alignment necessary at this time in order for the transfiguration of the earth. And now we turn the page. Now I'm going to read to you from The Mystic Spiral by Jill Peirce. Labyrinth and dance. The expanding spiral that creates and protects the center and the contracting spiral which dissolves it are both concepts implicit in the labyrinth. Because remember now, Thoth is calling the Ra'um a labyrinth, so we're going to get into why he's calling it that. By the existence of the labyrinth, the center is created and protected. When the labyrinth is penetrated, the center is dissolved. Entry and dissolution occur only under the right conditions, only when with the knowledge of the way. Now remember, we were talking about dissolving time, and here it says the expanding spiral that creates and protects the center and the contracting spiral which dissolves it are both concepts implicit in the labyrinth. So we could see the Ra'um is constantly contracting and expanding, dissolving its time function and bringing forth a new quantum of that function, and then dissolving that when it becomes no longer in resonance and creating a new one. This is what that is about dissolving time as a directional outcome, instead moving through time to choose the most ordered reality. This is the choice. This is the choosing. Although often intricate in form, the labyrinth is a spiral and one which returns. It is a representation of the cosmos and all cosmoses, and hence of all ordered entities, which correspond on the descending scale of analogy. It is therefore at once the cosmos, the world, the individual life, the temple, the town, the man, the womb, or intestines of the Mother Earth, the convolutions of the brain, the consciousness, the heart, the pilgrimage, the journey, and the way. Although often intricate in form, the labyrinth is a spiral and one which returns. It is a representation of the cosmos, and I just read that. Sorry. Okay, we'll go to the next one. As the labyrinth creates and dissolves, expands and contracts, so it reveals and conceals. It is cosmos to those who know the way, and chaos to those who lose it. I see I spelled creates wrong on the text, but I think you know what I meant. It is Adrian's thread, whose windings create the world and yet enable us to unravel it or ravel it. This is the same thread that runs through the argument, whose clue, the clue or ball of thread, we follow. And when we do not lose it, it leads us to the point. Yet it also conceals the point, disorientates us, and is the test of our endurance and knowledge. And certainly we can see this labyrinth as the way that we're walking, the path we're walking on this earth, with all its twists and turns. The spiral or labyrinth depicted in ancient tombs implies a death and re-entry into the womb of the earth, necessary before the spirit can be reborn in the land of the dead. But death and rebirth also mean the continuous transformation and purification of the spirit through life. The alchemists used the word vitriol vitriol, I guess that's right, vitriol, to stand For the vista interiora terre rectificando in vinis occultum lapidem. Visit the interior of the earth. Through purification, thou wilt find the hidden stone. Such a descent into the underworld, the kingdom of Pluto, is the theme of most initiation rituals and is comparable to the passage and is comparable to the passage through the wilderness or the dark night of the soul, which is experienced by mystics on their path. It is furthermore nearly always symbolized by the spiral. And now we come to the Ra'um and the Pymander. Those of you who have followed my work have heard about the Pymander before. That's the Thothic or Elohim computer that physically is connected to the center of the earth. And so what I say about it here is the Ra'um Labyrinth is one created by the Enochian masters of the Order of the Burning Bush. Now remember what I said about created. It is a universal format. It's just that what has been created is the drop of it, the reflection of it that's been placed as a lens into the planetary spectrum so that we can access it better. It is likened to an omni-universe made from cosmic string with a black hole at its center. The labyrinth is brought into the etheric physical entrainment via a high-order crystal computer in the central earth, known to this person, me, as the Pymander. With this crystal computer, a matrix is set into the ethers and anchored to the earth. This matrix is filled with dot sequences of Ra'um energy points to form a labyrinth gridwork. On the computer, and thus in actual energy frequency, a slice or bisection of the labyrinth fill resembles the complete cycle of the I Ching. Looking down through the labyrinth from the top to bottom, one would perceive the spiral. Attempting to move from one level of this dimensional grid to the next would reveal the actual labyrinth pathways. So again, it's all about perception. It's all about what we are seeing. That's the quantum universe. Remember, if you observe it, it changes. And I might add, how you observe it changes it. Your perception on these more sensitive realities here, not just the dot, the particle and the wave, but on the more sensitive realities, aspects of this universal format, you could perceive it one way at one time and another way at another time. It wouldn't be within your human perception that different, but it would have a difference because you would be in one perceptual mode at one time and in another perceptual mode in another time. Granted, they would all be encompassed within your your regular format, who you are as a person in this lifetime, and the extent of your perceptual abilities. So there would be a connection between the one perception and the other. You'd see a similarity, but there would be differences. There would be variances because you are a variant kind of person. You're variant all the time. You're changing a little here and a little there, even as I speak to you now. Let me see. I'm deciding whether I want to read all this fine print to you or not. Well, I was talking about the string theory, and these thin cosmic strings are so tiny, 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 smaller than a proton with a gigantic mass, several miles of string outweighing the Earth. Proximity to such string would cause all kinds of dimensional chaos unless, as my sources contend, one were to acquire Ra'um and integrate with the very oneness of divine fire, which would nullify the chaotic imbalance and use the inner workings of the string to flow through time in instantaneous omnetics, all directional awareness with being. Thus it becomes Adrienne's thread. Oops, excuse me. I know I'm making a little noise here with my microphone setup. Let me adjust it for just a moment and see if it will correct that problem. As the center of the Raum labyrinth is set, it is charged through the etheric substance of crystalline frequency externalized in obsidian. Now, there's the obsidian we can hold in our hand. There are all the crystals and the elements, we can touch and be a part of. And then there's the etheric versions. So when Thoth is speaking about the obsidian being at the center of the labyrinth, the Raum labyrinth, he's speaking of an etheric frequency of obsidian. Lightning branches are seen in etheric vision to strike the tip of an obsidian point as matter charges its energy to allow for the displacement of its mass by the free float of the Raum, whose essence holds no allegiance to material bonding. Obsidian initiates transformation and mastery over the physical plane. However, this mastery as has been explained, is really better defined as coexistence, striking harmonic access to the desired elemental bonding. As with all magical access, such a knowledge can be misused. Because of this fact, I'm sorry, an interruption here I keep forgetting to unplug ALXEIA.
I'm reminding you, exercise.
So let's try it again. As with all magical access, such a knowledge can be misused. Because of this fact, the Raum labyrinth is properly shielded. This still does not keep negative forces from trying to enter it. The obsidian center is a superconductor that could empower in many ways, good, evil, and imprudent. Yet it is guardianed by many layers of shielding from the highest levels of divine command. Turn a page again. Sorry. In the book Healing Stone by Julia Lorusso and Joel Glick, they state that obsidian, which is a volcanic glass, will remain static in its present state for another cyclic block of time. It is in a period of total rest, a void, a cooling off time. So much of it has been utilized for the lower forms of magic that it is impregnated with thought forms of negativity. Yet, the potential for its growth is such that there lies the seed that must wait for the right hour to develop safely, slowly, with positive and amplified power. And I say, most certainly its time has come, as the whole balance of the planet is awakened through the obsidian factor within the Raum labyrinth. Now, I would kind of disagree with what they've written here, just a little, because yes, obsidian has been used in black magic and whatever, a lot of different crystals and stones have. And I can understand that if enough of that happened, the collective grid of that crystal might harbor a proclivity toward that. But I disagree that the obsidian has done that, because it is a very high frequency form. And anything that comes out of the volcanic center of the earth, yes, it's primal, but primal energy clears itself very quickly, and it's fiery. So I would say that that's not a problematic factor in any obsidian, and it's certainly not when we're dealing with the higher etheric forms. By the way, this picture is rainbow obsidian. How could anything exist so beautifully on this planet and not be of a very high caliber? The labyrinth was set to the Ra'um in the period of the sun in Aries. From Symphony of the Zodiac by Torkham Saradarian, Aries is the transmitter of the cosmic fire, which my sources define as a product of the divine or sacred fire. Mr. Saradarian writes of 3 transmitters of fire. Aries releases cosmic fire. Leo releases solar fire. Sagittarius releases planetary fire. Master Dwalkul says that these fires constitute the yoga of fire, and it clears the way for the resurrection. The yoga of fire is the progressive at-one-ment with the inner fire. There was an ancient brotherhood that used to worship fire. They had 3 kinds of fire. One was created by rubbing branches together. This was the fire of friction, the fire of matter. Only members of the brotherhood could contact this fire. The second fire was lit by matches or by the sparks of rocks. This fire was analogous to the solar fire, and only initiates in this group could contact it. Now the third fire, and this is the one of special interest to us here, could be approached by only the most holy ones or high degree initiates, and was kept burning forever. This fire was the fire lit by lightning. On stormy days, they would wait until lightning struck a tree and immediately run and bring this fire to the temple. For each altar of fire, they provided such a flame. This fire was kept burning day and night as the symbol of the flame of life within the heart, as the link between the flame of the heart and the fire in space. And Saradarian continues with these 3 fires manifest on this planet as 7 flames. The flame in the heart of each atom, the flame in the seeds of the vegetable kingdom, the flame in the animal kingdom, the flame in the heart of every man, the flame in the heart of the hierarchy Christ, the flame in Shambhala Sant Kyi'Ra, the greater flame, the planetary source of life. Let's turn a page, excuse me. These books are so old, they were photocopied so long ago that it's practically like turning pages in the Dead Sea Scroll. Makes a lot of crackling sounds. Okay, so we turn this page now. My sources state that these 7 flames are the tongues of the divine fire. Ra'um is the right sequence of awareness that triggers the uniting of the 7, achieving omnipotent accord with all space-time realities. To continue on Aries in the Symphony of the Zodiac, Saradarian states, all flames eventually come together and form a fiery flower around the central fire of the planetary life. My sources, incidentally, me, Maya, refer to the central sun of the planet as the golden rose. Saradarian continues, such fiery flowers eventually form the petals of a greater fire and so on eternally. That is why the whole of creation, viewed from a distant point in unbounded space, looks like a fiery flower blooming in infinite space, as a lotus in limitless water. Resurrection is the progress of each flame from one kingdom to the next, from one plane to a higher one. The flame in each form is the life center of that form, the heart of the form. When the energy of the fire of Aries is released, each flame receives a shock. This shock is an invitation and challenge to synchronize its heartbeat with the pulse of the cosmic heart. The flame of the heart responds to the most remote subterranean fires. The Master Dwell Cool says, in Aries we have the bringing together of spirit and matter in the great creative activity in manifestation at the beginning of the evolutionary cycle. Aries is the beginning as well as the end. Resurrection is related to Aries. It is defined as going back to a former state of being. Well, I would agree to a point with that last sentence. However, we are now in a phase of our planetary stages to ascension, to planetary ascension, in which, while we are drawing upon the pure form that was related in past, we are on the precipice of creating a new presentation of that form. So I'm not really disagreeing with what he's saying here, because it's true. We are going back to a former state of being if you go back far enough to the pure, to the absolute pure. But what we are doing now is readying ourselves to create a new presentation of that pure flame, that pure form. In regard to the Raum Labyrinth, it removes sequential time from our path, from the path of Earth's karmic pacing, allowing us and our planetary field to recover some of the lost stars within our own black holes. Now, when I wrote this, I did not believe that I had been presented with a new Earth star concept yet. I think it's very close on the heels of that. I could be mistaken, but I think it's just not quite that I had received that. Or if I had, I'd been given only the basic rudimentary idea. But when I'm reading it now, of course, I'm seeing that the Raum as a universal dynamic is key to our planetary and personal transformation into the ascension modality. In taking a microcosmic look at the Raum Labyrinth, we will find that it is much like a fine tuner, activating a closer union with the center of being. For the individual, one need only to tune or attune For the individual, one need only to tune into its frequency and expand their imaging to include other space-time modes. Working with the Raum Labyrinth is a major step within the new world aspect of becoming Elohim, co-creators of a more perfected world. And so, before we continue, let me take a look at this again. Reading this now is so timely to connect to what I've recently been presenting about the return to the Rana time wave and how we are experiencing our fractured zones of time reality waves, and also how the One World Legion, the elite, whatever you want to call them, are trying to direct us with their off-world helpmates to a particularly frozen zone of a time wave that is not a time fracture line, a timeline fracture, that is not our point guide, that is not the true line that we are on now, as messed up as it seems, that is leading us to the planetary solvency of alignment with the universal Rana time wave, leading us into the new Earth star. That was a big sentence. I could have shortened it a bit, but anyway, I got there all the same. So we really need to be working with the Raum, okay, whatever it is, Raum, to get to keep us on the path, and not being led magnetically astray to these false time streams that are dead end boxes that can contain us and manipulate us. And I believe that's why I was guided to bring this forward at this time. So now we go to the Raum Labyrinth visualization. Visualize the labyrinth. I'm going to turn the page. Now I'm just taking you through this. You can do this on your own, of course, but I'm just taking you through the steps. Imagine yourself being at the outside rim and moving inward toward the center of the maze. This labyrinth contains your spiritual identity. As you seek the center, what symbols, patterns, impressions do you receive? Be aware of these messages, for they contain the keys to unlock your true pathings in life. So in other words, as you're imagining yourself within the labyrinth and moving toward the center of this maze labyrinth, know that it contains your spiritual identity. And as you seek the center, call upon your visualizing landscape to present you with symbols, patterns, impressions, or even energy frequencies, things that you feel and where you feel them. You might want to journal them after you have gone through this process, or even as you're going through it. That's the first stage, receiving the symbols and integrating them. Once you have found the center, place yourself inside the obsidian shield. Then allow yourself to resonate with the entire labyrinth as it becomes the greater labyrinth of the Raum. Your obsidian shield begins to become luminescent as it glows from the infusion of greater to lesser. You become the greater, merging with the mind of free flow existence. As your shield becomes light, see your spirit colors wrap scarves of enfolding rainbows about you, all colors of your glorious soul mandala. Feel the resonant chord of harmony between your most centered self and the Raum pulse of free flow. Once you have held this state of at oneness for a comfortable time, you may enter your commands into the matrix. These commands should not reflect the persona, but the spirit. In other words, you do not enter I want or I need, but instead that divine order be established in a particular situation or condition. Divine order is established within the vital condition of my body. In other words, this is an example. Or divine order is established in my workplace, my finances, my relationship, etc. In this way, you are not conjuring via your personal will, but instead you are affirming that divine order does exist in one or more or all aspects of your life. You are freeing yourself from karmic bonding, enabling you to escape the gravity of one reality and accept the reality best suited to your spirit journey. This process, of course, would work without the labyrinth. However, as we enter a new stage of co-creativeness on the planet, such tools as the Raum Labyrinth, which is a very real dimensional grid, are given to us to build the new world foundations more firmly. In other words, of course, this is positive affirmation work. You're very familiar with that. It's different from what you probably already do in that way. But if you take into consideration and operate within the frequency intentionally of the Raum labyrinth, you are accelerating and expanding this dynamic, and it's becoming more inclusive to all the other aspects of your soul alternative realities. The you and all these alternative realities, the ones that are harmonious with where you are now and need to be brought into on point with you, and the ones that are in fractured zones that need to be healed and maybe just dissolved so that those parts of yourself can come into the Thoth calls the point reflection of reality. So you're more able to do this if you're using the Raum labyrinth construct. It can be called anything, but it's the envelope field of no time, all time. And it follows a path that is spiralic in nature, that is accumulative in a labyrinth format, so that it brings you into bonding with the no time multidimensional self. I'm going to pause for a moment as I reflect on my ending here to this video. So let me put on pause for a moment. Okay. Again, this is so timely, and I picked this up and decided to do this. I've been wanting to do it for a while, but I hadn't really read it. You know, I was thinking, oh, this is probably interesting. I think maybe I'll do this. But today was the day, and it really is timely because of, as I said, the work I've been bringing forward now on the healing of the time fractures and bringing us into centered cohesion with the time reality wave, the timeline that is leading us into the new Earth star. There's only one that is leading us into the new Earth star. Now, I want to talk about that for a moment because that could be misunderstood. There are alternate realities that are healthy strands of the one, and they're going out in like little feelers, and they're making collective what do I want to call discovery journeys, but they're all feeding back into the one. So it's part of the one, but the fractured lines have been cut off from the one. Little filaments kind of dangle and connect here and there, but it's like they're fractured. They don't go anywhere. They're dead ends. Like branches, little branches that are just barely hanging on the tree, and they're half dead and they're falling off. And then there is the very constructed artificial timeline. I'm going to call it artificial. It's been claimed and reformatted for the use by those negative ones among us, above us, below us. And that is the one they wish to herd us as sheep into a dead-end canyon so that they can manipulate us for their purposes. And I have a whole video on that, so I'm not going into that. But that is something that we're not going to accept. We're not going there. And I'm making it part of my dedication and work at this time to alert people to that fact. Not only that it exists, but that we have power over the situation. We don't have to go there. It's really simple. You just don't go there. It's not like you're being grabbed in the night. It's not that kind of thing. However, through fear, through extreme anger, through judging of others, through allowing yourself to become magnetized by a lot of, I hate to use the word, but actual fake news that has twists and turns in it, you can be brought into that assumptive field. And again, I'm not going into it in detail. You can go back and look at the video I created on it for portal members. that I've already forgotten the title of. Oh, it's called, okay. Oh, something versus the agenda. I can't remember the first part. I make so many videos so fast, I just can't remember the names. But I just made it a little while ago, and it has versus the agenda on the end of it. And so this Raum labyrinth is a very important part of keeping us into the right ballpark. But you can't do it alone. We are the ones that have to, decide. We have to make our choices. And if we make them through the higher perspective of the Raum dynamic and not in the lower box of 1 minute follows the next, and we're slaves to those minutes and seconds and hours, then, apologies for the disruption. As I was saying, we have to receive our perspectives from outside the box. And of course, this has been true all along, but we haven't been doing it as a whole. And we probably will continue not to do it as a whole. But if we can have the 100th monkey effect, enough of us doing it, which will be accelerated through the Pymander. Remember, Thoth is saying that in our reality spectrum here, in this world, the Pymander is overseeing this drop, this one drop out of the ocean of the Pymander. And when the Pymander works on the drop, it accelerates, what I want to say, multiplies is the right word, the perceptions that we give it in the higher order, not the lower perceptions, but the higher ones. It just doesn't see the lower ones. It's not an equation in the Pymander. But all these frequencies that match the higher dictates of the Pymander, it will say, okay, give me your $5 and I'll make $1,000 out of it, your golden coin, and I will multiply it like the fishes in the loaves. So because the Pymander is working with our drop of the Raum, we can be confident that there's an intense acceleration process involved. It's a helpmate. This is the way they can help us, one of the ways. They can't step in and do everything for us because that's in our field of resolution, but they can help us in ways like this. So you don't have to follow my particular visualization of the Pymander, of the Raum. You can use your own. With all the information I've given you in this video, you can go through it again, maybe make notes, whatever. You can develop your own synthesis with the Pymander, here we go again, with the Raum and the Pymander for that matter, because the Pymander is the interactive equation. It's giving you the interactive equation, that is. I think I've talked myself out here. I'm beginning to sound like Jimmy Stewart. It's stuttering all over the place. So I'm going to end this video, and I hope that it does give you some information that you can work with. Until next time, happy trails. Oops, I have one more page. If I can do it. Here we are. Yes, that's my ending.